Welcome to the REI Foundation Podcast, where we cover all the steps and strategies to make your real estate dreams a reality. Now your hosts, Jason and Peely.
All right. So Lee Dumas, thank you again for being on the show. And a couple quick questions. We just want to jump into it here. If you could only ask one question to every podcast guest, what would it be?
What is inspiring you right now? I love that question because I think that changes so much every single day for every single person. And I know that that question asked to me yesterday or the month before would be completely different than it is tomorrow. And like, for instance, I woke up this morning and I got a notification in my inbox that IGTV just launched, Instagram TV. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. That's exciting. I'm inspired to create some content now on IGTV that I wasn't yesterday. So it's this ever-changing world that we live in. I think it's just good to remember whatever is exciting right now is in the moment. And let's just kind of keep our finger on the pulse and realize tomorrow's a new day with a new opportunity. You just never know if and when it's going to be an opportunity for you, but just be open to it.
Nice. That is inspirational.
I love it.
So if nobody was in harm's way, but your house was burning down, what is the one item you would save if there could only be one?
One item, I'd probably run in, grab my laptop and run. If again, we're talking like all people are fine here because, you know, I save most things to the cloud and stuff like that, but it would just be pretty handy to be able to have my laptop not melted into a little plastic Hulk.
Because you know there's always something on there that you did not save.
Absolutely.
Always.
Totally. You know, I have everything set up perfectly, you know, like all my keyboard shortcuts and, you know, my little things and that. And it's just like, I just want to keep this guy. I mean, I'm
it's like another child.
It is.
So with such a huge following with Entrepreneur on Fire, if 100 years from now, what is the one thing or I guess the premise for what you want people to look back on and get from Entrepreneur on Fire?
The power of the ripple effects, like the actuality that my show will inspire one person. And that one person will now go and create or launch something that they otherwise would not have launched. But then that person is now inspiring a whole range of people from what they've launched that I had absolutely no direct influence on. It's that third degree of separation. It's that ripple effect. And that's what really excites me about the world that we live in is by just putting out real solid value and just sharing it with the world in a free medium like podcasting where there's no barriers in place. You can just have this amazing ripple effect with the world.
Awesome.
Gosh, inspirational again. So what's some of the best advice you've gotten like as like a through line through your podcast, like something that you hear more like over and over again?
You know, one thing that just continues to come forward to me of people that are successful, and that's who I like to interview are successful entrepreneurs, is if you want to be something, you have to do that thing. And a lot of people don't really realize that, hey, like at one stage in my life, I wanted to be a podcaster. And I had never been a podcaster, but what did I have to do to become a podcaster? I had to podcast. Like I literally had to do that thing. I had to podcast and I was really bad when I started and I was kind of okay after 400 episodes. And now I'm post episode 2000 and, you know, and I'm still improving every single day. So I have to do that thing. So, you know, I hear all the time people saying, oh, I want to do, you know, Instagram stories, but I'm so bad on video. Of course you're bad on video because you've never done it before. So how are you going to get better? You're going to do that thing. You have to be willing to be bad. And every successful entrepreneur that I've ever interviewed who is known for being great at something, you can trace their lineage back to when they were horrible at it because that's the world that we live in.
Yeah, we call the early day of the podcast the dark days. so we don't look back on those.
I call them the cringeworthy era because it is cringeworthy, but hey, it's a stage that we all have to go through.
But it's great advice. I mean, just get it done, do it if you want to do it, if that's something you want to get done.
So simple. You started podcasting 7-8 years ago. Is that
yeah,
fair?
6 years ago.
6 years ago. So if we fast forward today and you had never done a podcast and from that point you were going to start today with a medium, would podcast be your choice, or what if someone's listening? Let's rephrase this. If someone's listening right now and is thinking about putting themselves out there and really just starting to build a brand and giving back and providing inspiration, what medium would you tackle?
I would tackle podcasting. Like I would know myself, and I would know that I love the medium of podcasting. I go for walks every morning. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm in cars. I'm listening to podcasts. Like, that's the medium that I know, that I love, that I consume. So when it comes time to produce it, guess what? Since I'm a very rabid listener, I know what a listener wants. I know how to produce the kind of content that a listener is going to want. So I would go forward in that medium. Podcasting is a great medium in 2018 and beyond, because we're all so busy. We're on the go. You know, we're going to the gym, we're driving in our cars, we're doing all these things. And podcasting allows you to consume content while you're still doing other things. Like, if you want to sit and watch some YouTube videos, that's awesome. But you're sitting and you're watching YouTube videos. You're not changing your baby's diaper. You know, you're not folding laundry, you're not weeding the garden, you're not doing other things that you need to do at some other time, where podcasting allows you to do both of those things at once, which is why, to me, it's a medium that's always going to fit a special niche. It's never going to be the thing, but it's going to fit a very special niche in a lot of people's lives. And that's just been proven by the past 6 years on the explosion of podcasting. Now, people like me, who just launched a daily podcast, being really bad at it, by the way, was able to build a 7-figure business in about a year and a half that I've maintained for the past 5+ years. And like, that is because I've just been focused on creating that free, valuable, and consistent content. So I think podcasting is an amazing medium for that reason. I love it. And I think it's going to continue to be a great medium. But one thing that I always say to people is, if you think that you've missed something, like, instead of being a whiner about what you've missed, how about you just recognize that there's something always coming next? Like, if you were whining when you missed podcasting back in 2012, you missed Meerkat. And guess what? Meerkat then turned into Periscope, which then turned into Snapchat, which then turned into Instagram stories. There's always that next thing. And then today, Instagram TV launches. So, I mean, there's always that next thing that you can jump on and be first to market, to have that land grab if you feel like you missed the land grab on something else. So just be open, be excited, and just know that every day is a new day, like we talked about with what's inspiring you right now. It's going to always be changing. So just keep that mindset fresh.
So how do you think you built such a amazing company in, what you said, a year and a half? You went from not knowing what you were doing, kind of sucking, to having a multi-million-dollar business. How do you do that?
Timing was huge. Again, 2012, podcasts were just starting to take off. I was able to get in, be the first and only daily podcast for, you know, a significant amount of time, and getting some great guests because of that, like Tim Ferriss, Seth Godin, Gary Vaynerchuk, like, just kind of really propelled my brand, allowed me to speak at different venues. And then podcasting really started picking up in 2013, 2014. And me, being a person who had been there, was like, okay, why don't I create a community teaching people how to actually do this thing called podcasting? Because right now, there's just a couple crappy blog posts about how to podcast that don't really help you that much. And then I launched Podcasters Paradise back in October of 2013. So just about 13 months after I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire, the podcast, I launched Podcasters Paradise, the podcasting community, just 13 months after I launched the podcast. And that quickly turned into a 7-figure community, which now, fast forward to where we're at today, has generated over $4.5 million in revenue. And that's just one of the revenue streams that we've generated, and the over $14 million that we've generated to date with our business since 2012. So that's just kind of been where, if you're early, you do a land grab, you add a lot of value, and then you see what the opportunities are, which for me was to create the solution that a lot of people were having. How do I start a podcast? How do I grow my podcast? How do I monetize my podcast? Well, introduce Podcasters Paradise. Create, grow, and monetize your podcast. It wasn't rocket science. It wasn't even really my idea. It was my listeners' problems that I just created the solution for.
Wow.
So I absolutely love that. And if we build on that there, someone's starting a podcast today, what are 3 through lines from what you've seen, interviewing 2,000 people, having the podcaster community, what are 3 through lines for people who are successful in creating an engaging podcast?
Well, today, if you're launching a podcast in 2018, I think you have to be very specific on a segment of the market that you're going to serve better than anybody else. So back in 2012, I was able to say, there's no daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. That's a pretty broad topic, interviewing entrepreneurs. But back in 2012, nobody was doing it. So I was the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. I was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. I was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. So what is the segment that you can dominate? Like, what is the segment that you can serve better than anybody serving right now? Like, there might be an e-commerce podcast out there right now, but why not become like the Shopify podcast, for physical products? Like, that podcast is going to win for people that have physical products on Shopify over that broad e-commerce. And then you're going to win in that segment, get some momentum, and then you can broaden out later. You start niche, you start segmented, and then you build that audience there.
So if our listeners out there want to start their own podcast and they're like, how do I do this? Where can they find you to start it?
Well, I do have a completely free course at freepodcastcourse.com. I specifically made it really tricky, freepodcastcourse.com. You can just sign up and start your completely free podcasting course, and you'll learn how to create, grow, and monetize your own podcast for $0. And that's, what that free course is all about.
Perfect.
Great. Well, we'll leave you with one lasting question. If you could leave knowing the truth to only one question, what would that question be?
Is there life after death?
Love it.
What do you think?
If I had to just honestly say what I think, I would say no. Probably not. I just actually got done watching the Netflix show Cosmos, which is really interesting. Oh. It just shows, the birth of our universe and our galaxy all the way up through today. And you're just like, we're just kind of pieces in this puzzle called life, and we come and we go and our da-da-da, but who knows? But it'd be interesting to know that for a fact. Right now, I just think, probably not, but who knows? Time will tell.
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
I do have one thing for your listeners.
Go ahead.
Is, having now interviewed over 2,000 people, I've realized that successful entrepreneurs have one thing in common. They have identified their big idea and they've crushed it. So just like with the free podcast course that I mentioned, this training that I worked so hard on is completely free. And it's called 3 hours to your big idea. And that's the promise. If you give me 3 hours, I will give you your big idea, because you're in one of 3 camps. You either have no big idea, you either have a lot of ideas, but you're not sure which is the big idea, or you think you have your big idea, but you need a little more clarity and focus. Whichever one of those 3 buckets you're in, this 3-hour training is going to get you to your big idea. So just visit yourbigidea.io, and in 3 hours, you'll have your big idea.
I love it. I'm definitely in number 2. I'm definitely in number 2. It's not even there's not even a question.
We're hopping on that right now.
Yes, get on that.
Yes.
Well, this has been engaging, inspiring, incredible. Thank you so much for the time, John. Definitely appreciate it.
I enjoyed it, guys. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning into the REI Foundation podcast. Check back next time for more awesome tips and strategies to launch your new you in real estate.